Hello, everybody! Welcome back to my little corner of the internet where I will talk about stories of my life, my work both as a comic book author and translator, my cats Hey Hey and Serengeti, and the occasional movie, book, or TV series review and recommendation, as well as some rants if the feeling hits. Today's subject is a little bittersweet for me, because while I have wanted to talk about this particular movie and how I feel it's deeply misunderstood by people who criticize it, the reason why I moved it a bit from my original plan to talk about it is very sad. See, just after I post the last Let's Talk About, Bruce Willis, who happens to be my favorite actor of all time because I have weird tastes, announced through his family that he is retiring because of his aphasia. And because of that, well, I thought long and hard about how to make a tribute to the man who has given me and so many others so many hours of entertainment. Yes, I even like his singing and have his albums on Spotify, why do you ask? But didn't want to go with the most obvious choices of Die Hard, The Sixth Sense, or even Moonlightning. And I still haven't gotten my hands on long enough footage of him as Paul Sheldon, and that would be breaking my rules about not talking about Stephen King outside my Stephen King videos anyway. So, there was one movie that is rarely praised, and that was a love project for him, so why not take that one? So let's talk about Hudson Hawk, period pieces, modern fairy tales, and how sometimes what may look like a horrible mistake is precisely what we need to make a masterpiece. Or at least a very entertaining movie. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Hudson Hawk was one of Bruce Willis' worst-rated movies by critics before the deluge of terrible direct-to-streaming movies of the last few years. To be honest, it may be lower than some of those new ones because it simply seems that there's no one who wants to find the good points of the movie, plot, and characters. Everyone insists that it's too much and too disjointed, and the fact that it was co-written by Willis and he never again tried to write a film is often mentioned. The production of the film was quite troublesome. Yes, among other things, no cats. The main female lead had to be cast a week before shooting started due to the two women dropping out of the film, in specific Isabella Rossellini and Marushka Demeters. The script was being written during filming, and filming on location in Italy made the cost go quite high very fast. The budget itself was $65 million, but it only made back about $70 million give or take, and thus it was an absolute flop that pretty much everyone blamed on Willis because of his insistence of how things should be done because it was a passion project. And it was obvious that the studio just didn't get what the movie's vision was, and thus that was the main problem. Willis was doing an action comedy heist film, the studio thought they were doing Die Hard 3, and hired directors and people who would treat the movie as such. This caused, of course, for the movie to have a ton of co-writers, hence the writing during filming, and thus a lot of coherence was lost. And still, while it will never be considered a masterpiece, here I want to defend Hudson Hawk as a very worthy cult classic, a comedy movie that needed the right marketing, and one that most audience originally misunderstood, not by a fault of their own, because, look at the poster. Let's start at the beginning. What is Hudson Hawk's plot? Eddie Hudson Hawk Hawkins is a cat burglar and a safe cracker, slightly obsessed with cappuccino, which back in the 90s weren't as easy to get as they are now. After he's freed from jail in parole, he's blackmailed into stealing a model horse made by Leonardo da Vinci, which he does with his partner Tony Five-Ton Messina in the most memorable and musical heist ever in movies. Unfortunately, his blackmailers, who start being a small mafia family who happens to be controlled by a group of CIA agents who happen to have gone rogue and are now working for an evil corporation, the Mayflower Industries, if you can't believe it, want him to steal even more things, so he gets kidnapped and sent to the Vatican, where he has to choose between being an obedient little minion and help them recreate the legendary Machina del Oro, a machine created by Leonardo da Vinci which, when not working properly, turns lead into gold, or being the hero of the story and stop the Mayflowers before they can collapse the world economy, save the woman he just fell in love with, and finally have the time to drink a cappuccino. Once again, there is a lot of criticism against Hudson Hawk, most of which come from the fact that absolutely no one, except maybe Willis and producer and music executive Robert Kraft, knew what to make from the movie itself. Marketing originally tried to paint it as the next Die Hard in the Vatican, I guess, without considering that it was a comedy first and foremost because it drew more from Willis's experience as an actor in Moonlighting, a series which I love, but it's horribly hard to get right now, and it was seminal on how we see TV today, starting with the will they, won't they trope that every single show seems to try nowadays. And so, when audience went to see it, they were very surprised to see that it had far more laughter than explosions. And it still has a good share of explosions, let me tell you. There is also the fact that, possibly because of Willis writing and rewriting the scenes on the fly, keeping continuity between takes, let alone scenes, seemed like a lost battle. There are a couple of moments in which you can clearly see it's night outside, and then as the character moved to another window, it's daylight. And at the time, people said that that was a perfect example of no one actually caring to do their job. But thing is that the night and day changing thing, it's weirdly constant in a way that it could only be if it was, on purpose. Then we get to the fact that there are a couple of scene transitions that wouldn't look out of place on a Looney Tunes cartoon, such as when Hawk and Tommy jump out from the auction house and straight into the Mario family coach. There is also a running joke at Hawk not knowing what a Nintendo is, which makes it a lot funnier when you consider that the first millions we meet are, in fact, the Mario brothers, who thank goodness are not called Mario and Luigi, but Anthony and Caesar. Or Hawk falling in a box in New York to come out of said box in Italy. Both were seen at the time as cheap tricks by the critics. And finally, the fact that yes, many of the characters are cartoons. The Mario brothers are stereotypical mob bosses, the CIA candy bars are stereotypical spies, we have an undercover nun with a poison cappuccino machine, and the Mayflowers wouldn't look out of place as Saturday morning villains for Captain Planet. I mean, the way their plan is literally to destroy the world's economy just because they can, they are bored, without a real contingency plan for their own survival, and because of something that Minerva read on a flight magazine. As a trivia fact, the fact that the Mayflowers are a couple was not in the original script. Joel Silver, producer, wanted a male villain, played by Robert Rand. Michael Lenham, the director, preferred a female villain, played first by Audrey Hepburn, later choosing Sandra Bernhard because Hepburn's health made the role too hard for her, and then, Willis decided to split the difference and cast both Grant and Bernhard as husband and wife. Not that helped a lot with the rewrites, but hey, they are very memorable, especially Minerva and Sandra Bernhard's fashion choices. Oh my god, those are amazing. All of this makes it impossible to see the story movie as a real story. Even if it's a screwball comedy, those jumps of logic just don't happen in real life. Thing is, and this is my defense of this movie, Hudson Hawk is not supposed to be real, even within the movie's universe. We are, in fact, watching a fairy tale in which things work the way the narrator needs them to work. This is why all the timing works for people to finish lines from other characters. Both Hawk and Tommy had the plot armor to end all plot armors, and the CIA candy bars look as if they came out from a comic book. And this is not just me trying to defend the movie, because you see, it starts and ends with a book being read. We're being told a story by an unseen narrator that only wants to entertain us. Logic be damned. I mean, the very first lines of the movie are Long ago, the Duke of Milan commissioned a little-known artist to erect a mammoth statue of a horse. The time was 1481. The artist was Leonardo da Vinci. The guy on the donkey is just a guy on a donkey. How could anyone not know right then and there that we were going to see a fairy tale? The fact that we see this at the same time as a book is opening and we see the illustration of the guy on the donkey going down a path in Italy before it becomes a real guy in a donkey going down a path in Italy helps a lot with the whole storyteller thing, And I am weirdly confused as why people missed it the first time around. Watching Hudson Hawk with this new perspective, things starts to make sense. Why is Hawk's parole office so obviously corrupt without no one else mentioning it? It's a story where bad people have to be overtly bad. Why does scenery changes so fast without an establishing shot? It's a story and getting plane tickets is boring to hear about. Why do the CIA candy bars are always where Hawk ends up? Because they're set up as the main villains who need to be there, and thus the story puts them there. And from here on, spoilers ahead, so in case you haven't watched the movie, stop, watch the movie. You really want to get surprised. If you have watched the movie and you insist that it's a bad one, let's continue so I will explain to you why it's not bad. I don't want you to think that there is no rhyme or reason to Hudson Hawk's story. There is, but it is under the rules of a fantastical story, a cartoon if you will. And in fact, some people have described it as a live-action Looney Tune. For example, yes, Hawk will never get to drink his cappuccino unless the mission is completed. And even now that we have Starbucks and other coffee shop in every corner, the mere idea of not being able to get a cappuccino is silly. But remember, this was in the pre-Starbucks days. In fact, in a way, Hudson Hawk was the original coffee hipster because at the beginning of the 90s, no one cared about cappuccinos. And yes, it is the same rule as a Scrat, who would never get to keep his acorn until, well, I am not going to get sentimental over a squirrel again. The point is not how unlikely is it that someone can drink a cup of coffee in peace, cappuccino or not, especially if he lives in a bar which has a cappuccino coffee maker. But that we know that, after the second time, the moment he grabs a cup, plot will happen, and it's part of the fun to know how it's going to happen and how is he not going to get to drink that cappuccino. My personal favorite, Poisonful. Yes, the candy bars seem to be able to teleport wherever Hawk is, but they also have important rules. They always appear in the exact same order until they get betrayed. First the Snickers, followed by Almond Joy, then Butterfingers, then, as part of the background, Kit Kat. And with the exception of Kit Kat when he dresses up as Hawk and later as a statue, they all always are color-coded with the same colors as the candy bar wraps. And Kit Kat managed to keep the red in all of his other disguises, as I said, except for Hudson and Statue. Even their deaths follow the same order. Snickers get blown up, then Almond Joy gets killed by the same bomb, Butterfingers is killed by the Mouthflowers, and then Kit Kat dies in the same manner. Kit Kat makes no noises, all his dialogues are pre-printed cards. But Eek and Og, the Mayflower's answer to the candy bars, are allowed one line each, their last ones, who happen to be their names. That is a narrative rule. And of course, whenever Hawks need to synchronize with someone else for anything, that's when the songs come up. When he works alone, the soundtrack remains strictly behind the fourth wall. So as you can see, there is a logic to the madness. A care that was kept in many events, even when the scene was written on the fly, like Tony's final fate, which I will not spoil for you because that's the point of the movie where you have to ask yourself, what did I miss? And I refuse to take that away from you if you haven't seen the movies. It's just that it's not the logic of a real-world story, which means it's not the logic that most critics were expecting, and thus, they just missed a lot of the subtlety, because they were a bit distracted with the grandiose scenery chewing. Because, oh my god, yes, Bruce Willis was overacting all over, but Robert Grant and Sarah Bernhardt must have ended up in a diet afterwards, because there was no piece of the set that they would not eat. Again, Minerva and Darwin Mayflower are epic comic book villains from the Golden Age, trapped in a 19th movie, and I love them so much for that. And because again, I have to say, Hudson Hawk was not and was never planned to be Die Hard. In fact, it's very important to remember Hudson Hawk was a lot better received when DVD copies started to roll around, because they changed the cover's tagline. The original was "Catch the excitement, catch the adventure, catch the hawk." However, for the DVD, they changed it to "Catch the excitement, catch the laughter, catch the hawk." So now people knew they were going to watch a comedy. I want to end this by reminding you that Hudson Hawk is a delightful comedy, as long as you watch it with that in mind. So really, go and rediscover it if you had put it down as that weird Bruce Willis movie that was not Die Hard. I'd even go as far as to say that if you remember Moonlightning and hate that you can't stream it because of the music rights, don't have the My Flowers fortune to buy the now out of print DVD set, Hudson Hawk is exactly in that same vein of Bruce Willis comedy that will make you smile a few hours after you finish watching it. To be completely honest, we need more silly comedies in our lives. So, in honor of Bruce Willis' great career, just check it out and remember, this is the man who completely changed action heroes as we know them, precisely because he dared to do what no one else was doing at the time. After all, you can keep your preconceived ideas and grow up to be a mule. Or you can swing on a star, carrying moonbeams home in a jar. I want to thank my DA patrons, Mitch Hyman, Elaine Ho, and Jessica, as well as my first supporters, Tanya Pineda, and Amy Song, who is the greatest human being in the whole planet, and without whom these videos would not be possible. I also want to remind you that if you want to support these and my other projects and get your name mentioned here, you can do so at patreon.com/Alisa with a link on the description, as I know my name can be hard to spell. And with just $1 a month, you will always be thanked in my videos, as well as getting access to a ton of art before anyone else. Or you can support me once on Coffee, also linking on my Linktree, and you will mention in my next video. And if you can support me this way, I also accept likes, subscriptions to the channel, comments so that the algorithm catches engagement, and of course, you sharing the links. Or, well, sometimes in my social media, I ask little questions about future videos, and those who answer correctly will also get mentioned here. I also welcome all your questions, feedbacks, and suggestions in the comments below. This was Alisa Zarate signing out until the next time that we get together to talk about something.